Hello everyone, welcome to our video to walk you through Epicor's kinetic engineering process. So in this video we're going to walk through the change management for a specific product that is being uplifted in revision, and we're making some changes to its bill of materials. So for that we're going to start right here in our part master. So the example that we're going to use for this is going to be our DCD 200 ml part. This is a multi-level frame assembly to manufactured item. And from here, we're going to navigate to our revisions area. So you can see this part has been through a couple of revisions. A, its initial one. You can see that it's currently unapproved. And then we have B as the currently approved effective revision as of September 2008. You can see a note of the description there on its improved manufacturing process. As you position yourself in the revision, there are some actions here you can take. You can delete it. You can look at relevant attachments to it. If we explore our menu up here, there's some other revision specific options. But if we drill down to the specific revision, let's say B, we can see other comments on what was changed on that specific uplift. Any alternate methods related to revision B, of course the audit log of every time it's been checked out and modified, and some additional important points. But most relevant, our revision level, description, effective date, reference drawing, a reference engineering change order number just for your internal reference. And of course, which site this applies to, which for single site companies, then you would just always have that same value defaulted there. So let's go back to our revisions list just so we can see them all in a single spot. So we have A and B, and let's say we're going to start revision C. So I'm going to open up a new row here and say this is going to be C, and we're going to say this is going to be an update to the BOM that's going to become effective as of today, or it could be out in the future. Let's say by maybe next year we could go that way. Let's say by January 1st, and this is the drawing reference. I'm just gonna make a number here. Let's say this is E, and related to specific ACO number. So this is just if it's coming from an internal, from like an internal reference you want to have there. If it's coming from a customer request or something like that, it's a free-form field you can tie into. Once you've started your revision, the next step is to check it out. We're going to check it out to our engineering workbench. So for that, we need to create a new ECO. So I'm going to click on that button. It's going to ask for some details. We could give it a group ID. So we can make it maybe just today's date, or whatever reference you want to have there. The reason we have an ECO group that we're creating right here is because part of that change order may involve multiple parts to be updated. So you can check out multiple part revisions to a single group. So I'm just gonna say update BOM for DCD is my description. We can reference there our ECO number. Now the next steps here is the workflow group. So the workflow group is essentially going to be the team that's going to be working on this engineering change. You can have one or multiple. If you have different engineering teams based on the type of item it is that is being updated. So let's say this is for example a Department of Defense type product. Then in the task sets, you can define different workflows on how this is going to be approved. You define all these based on your different scenarios. Like maybe if it's an internal request, it follows certain path versus being an external request. And if there are more granular types of changes that you need to have further due diligence and sign-offs and approvals. So I'm just going to go with an internal ECO change for this one. And there's some additional dates here. Completion date, that'll be filled out when we complete it, and the effective date, we can say that's going to be the 1st. That's kind of resonating to a previous step. And then in the comments you can add additional details on what this change is about. But we're going to say okay, this is going to be revision C, and hit okay on that. So now this button will change from checkout revision to our engineering workbench as I click on that. So you can see now I have that option right there. So when we pull up our engineering workbench, that's where the changes actually take effect. So I'll expand this. So right here, well, first of all, on the left side of the screen, you can see that there's nothing on the bill of materials, nothing in the routing for this revision C yet. We can see the details that we filled out for the ECO group. Here in the tasks, there's some tasks being fired up in the background to your team, either concurrently or sequentially, depending on how you set them up. Maybe we need to document the changes. We need to generate a bill of materials and routing, get an approval. For some changes, you may have additional tasks here that notify your team if any active transactions are going to be impacted. So for example, as we're making a change to DCD 200 ml, that's a manufactured part. So maybe I need to go look at all the active production jobs associated to that. So I'm going to have my dashboards I can look up that part and figure out what jobs are out there, which are active and the different statuses. And as I go through these, I can, further detail out exactly where they are in the process. Like this one, we've issued all the materials, we've practically completed all the operations. So it's going to be hard to, modify that job. But we can see, next job down, some processes have been done. So this will, allow your production team to see exactly where things are for any open jobs for that item that is being impacted. If we were changing something about the bill of materials that is, impacting purchasing, you have your purchase advisor. You could go look up a part or look up a component within that structure change and figure out, what purchasing history there's associated to it. If you currently have anything on order that you may need to modify. So there's going to be multiple screens your team can consult to figure out what the impact is on active transactions. But the actual notification method to let your team know that there's an ongoing change that may impact them would be to the task set. So we would usually add that as part of this little workflow. That task gets assigned to a role and, of course, to an actual individual in your team. So they are notified either via email. They could see it in their collaborate stream. Right here showing up in their social stream, so to speak, on any changes that impact them, or it could also be displayed in their home screen. If you have like a running lists of your pending tasks, you could always embed that here in your home. This is just the parts where you use lookup, but you could have something like this but for tasks. So let me go back here to my engineering change. We can close out of here. We don't need that. So that's the story with the tasks. These get completed. As they get completed, it can, trigger the next sequential task on the workflow. You can flag some of the mandatory specifically for approvals or sign-offs. So you can do that. Something else that happens here is that if someone's actively working on that change, based on your settings, you can set up so it defaults to log that change. So only one person can work on it at a time. And then you can unlock it there if you need to. But anyway, so that's kind of the management of the change. Then, of course, here to define the bill of materials, based on our previous demos, we've talked about different ways that you could populate this. It could be an integration to your CAD system that's pulling up, the model and bringing up the bill of materials information. In this case, I'm just going to keep it simple because it is revision C. I'm just going to go get the details from revision B and just make some like minor modifications to that. So let's pull up revision B, which is the currently approved one. I'll say OK, and you'll see that this was all populated with all the details, with all the indented levels of the bill, and so on. So everything's pulling through. And let's say, all I'm doing is adding a component or adding a material here. We're just going to add one to this top level. Let's add that SS125 to this level. And there's going to be some additional columns I can fill out. This defaulted to one sheet. Let's make that 2 sheets and save it. So let's say that's all the change I needed to do. Of course, you can make a whole bunch of changes here. Change, the bill. Change instructions on the operations. Add some comments there. Add additional attachments. So there's, all that kind of range of updates you can do. Once you've gone through all your approvals, especially if you have mandatory items, then that revision will be available for check-in. So assuming I completed them all, you have these boxes that say check out, check-in allowed. You can actually define when approval and check-in is allowed based on the completion of the workflow tasks. So if you haven't gotten to your key approval, the check-in option won't even be available. So right now it is, because I don't have any mandatory tasks. Other things you can do here is view costs. So based on the changes that you've done to that revision, you can, have a kind of preliminary view of the costing information for that part. That's what this button here represents. But anyway, once we've captured the change, in this case I'm just going to say approve and check in. That is going to approve revision C. Check-in has been completed, and this is going to clear that up, and then we can close out of here. And if I go back here to my part master, I'm just going to refresh it just so we can see that that should now be approved. And it was approved today. It's not effective until January 1st. So technically, I can have 2 revisions approved at a time. So from here till, the end of the year, I can still run revision B, and we'll be okay with that. Until the start of the year, it's going to automatically uplift it to revision C. So any new work will be defaulted to be built at revision C. If our revision B is left approved, then any specific requirements, let's say by the customer or at the time of creating a production order, you can still manually use and direct it to revision B if it's still approved, but it will all default to C because that's the latest effective revision. So now the change there. So other things we can do here, I'll go back to my menu. We have a tool called Revision Compare. So if you ever need to compare changes on, previous revisions, let's say I'm gonna use that DCD 200 ml example we just walked through, and I want to compare what changed from revision B to that same part, DCD 200 ml, to revision C, which is our new one. I can compare those, and then down here it'll show me what the changes were. So of course the revision was uplifted, which is going from B to C, and then we can see that we added that material SS125. So those are all the changes we did. If I go to my routing changes, the only thing that was updated there was probably my revision. Let me see here. Yeah, and I think I may have clicked some changes there in revision, in that operation for assembly. Remember when I opened it for the instructions? So you can see that pretty easily there. It will tell you if there was an actual update. Here in the BOM status, we didn't really change anything. Even though we viewed the assemble, it's really just highlighting it because I'm positioned it there. But you can see nothing was updated on my routing. It's just that one material that I added. So it's a quick way to figure out what changed. And it can be done from different parts, comparing 2 different parts. You can compare different quotes or quote to part, or even jobs, because we're holding bill of materials and routing information at all those areas. So it's a good tool. Other ones that sometimes we get asked about, mass part and mass operation replace or delete. So sometimes if you just need to, a part has been replaced and completely by a new one, let's say a component or a material because of a quality issue or something, and it's being used in 100 bill materials, you can do a mass part replace or delete. So for example, if I do, I'm going to change 00C1 to 00C2 because there was an update there, I can make those changes. And it of course you want to restrict access to the screen because you don't want just anyone to go in and make those changes. So I'm just going to say yes, and we can see the parts that were impacted for that change. So it's a quick way to do those types of updates. It can also be done on a delete option mode, so you're not replacing it, you're just taking it out. You can do that. It will create a line in the audit log too, so you know the history of when that was changed or taken out. And same thing happens for operations. So if you need to replace a process in your routing with a new process that you put together, you can do that same type of massive transaction. So those are some of the change management processes. The last question I want to address that we get sometimes is, what if it's just an engineering change request or notification that doesn't necessarily have to become a change order? So sometimes, people identify issues during production that they may need to report and follow up on that may result in a change to engineering. Well, for that, we usually rely on the case management. You may have seen this before from a customer service perspective when you're reporting issues from the customer. But that's why we have different case types. So we have a type called ECO. So you could potentially use the same case management concept for potential engineering change requests. So the key difference is that they'll be categorized under a different type, and they can point to different workflows than the ones you would use for customer-based cases. But what this provides you is, a way to follow up on those issues, and then based on the outcome of the case, that may, result in an actual change order that is processed in the steps we showed you before. So it can be linked to an internal contact and an employee. It can be attached to a specific part number. So you can utilize kind of the same tools that you would from a customer service side, but for an internal application. Maybe you need to create a corrective action as the outcome of this, or maybe it was reviewed and a change wasn't really necessary. You can document the changes, and because you have different categories here, when time comes to report on your open cases or your completed cases for a certain type, you can isolate them from the customer based cases. So this is a good way to track that. It has that same workflow or task set concept, so you can do your proper review before determining that it actually needs to go through an ECO. Other than that, I think that should cover it. If you have any other questions, please feel free to let us know. We'll be glad to follow up. Thank you for your time.